Okay, well, welcome back to the Automotive Tales podcast for this very short one-off episode. Well, it might not be short, because we've got a good 45 minutes to get to the NEC. So we're going to chat rubbish for probably 45 minutes.
Yeah.
And maybe shout at cars on the motorway as we go.
That's the one. That's the one.
So, Greg, we are in the car. We are heading to the NEC for this year's Classic Car Show. And so we decided we're going to do a podcast. We haven't done one for, crikey, over a year now. So we have a lot to catch up on.
Yeah, just a tad. It's been quite a long burners. For those of you who have noticed in the continuity that I have now sported a beard. I have had 5 months away at Her Majesty's pleasure. Not criminally. Armed forces for my sins, so...
I'm glad you clarified that. Those people are like, oh, he's been in prison for 5 months.
No, 5 months in Romania, so if anybody's interested. But yeah, I now sport the fashionable beard.
So last time we did the podcast, we spent a bit of time talking about things that irritate us. And I know you're itching to have a rant. Because you've been driving a variety of different cars as pool cars and hire cars recently. So what's the first thing you want to really rant about? What's really annoyed you about these new cars?
Well, for those of you who follow me on Twitter, YorkshireCEng, you'll know that I'm started doing some hire car one-liners. I'm working through a series of hire cars at the moment. All of them are about 6 to 12 months old. BMW, Volkswagen, MG being a couple that I've been through. But the biggest thing I've got at the moment that seems to have come to fruition, particularly amongst the German manufacturers, is touchscreen everything. Touchscreen on the steering wheel, touchscreen in the dash, all the controls touch. And I'm sorry, it's just wrong. It's distracting and it's wrong. The example I'll give you, late at night on a Wednesday evening driving down to Bristol, I'm tired, it's been a long day, I've got to get down there for the following morning, and I'm trying to adjust the temperature. When you look over at the touchscreen, the temperature controls aren't lit, and you have to go into 4 menus to get to the basic functions you want. It's wrong. And I think what is scary, and I think what a lot of people don't sometimes realise, is I was looking at the touchscreen so much, I looked up, I just realised how far I'd travelled. And I have to call into question, at what point are we going to end up with some major smashes if we haven't already, because people are being distracted by this obsession by manufacturers of everything being touchscreen.
I couldn't agree more. So those that follow the Automotive Tales channel will be familiar with the video I did about the Volvo V60R design that we've got as our daily runaround. And one of the things I point out on that is that there's sort of one too many features buried in the menus in that. I like to have kind of key buttons, tactile buttons I can find my way to without taking my eyes off the road for certain key functions.
And this is where I think I ranted about the Golf GTD Mark 8 that I had, and the fact that, you know, you try and change the volume on the touch sensitive controls on the steering wheel, and you change the cruise control and vice versa, or you'd knock it out.
And that's dangerous.
Which is really a pain in the backside, where it's got adaptive cruise control linked to safety systems, so it's trying to auto brake and auto accelerate. But the 1 Series has adaptive cruise control, it has buttons, but at least in that car, in the middle they've put a very small little tiny screen. It's only a couple of inches in size, but it's got that key thing of fan speed and temperature.
It's independent from the main infotainment system.
Yes, and going one step further, and again this goes back to my comments about a big comfortable car with the MG HS that I had last week. Across the bottom, and probably the same as John with the Peugeot really, that he's reviewed, they've got a set of piano keys that had all the critical functions, you know, heater screen, main screen for demist, shortcut to temperature, shortcut to home. Just critical buttons. The VW, none of it. And it makes it really, really, really distracting.
So it's interesting that we've got MG, which is essentially a new to the UK market Chinese manufacturer under an old brand, the old MG brand, producing these sort of SUVs, sort of entry level to sort of lower mid-range. And then you've got the big players, Volkswagen and BMW, and the ones that have got it wrong, it seems, is Volkswagen, which is crazy. The Golf is the mainstay of the Volkswagen range. It's kind of the benchmark for everything else, and they seem to have got it wrong.
And bear in mind, it's supposed to be the people's car. I can see a lot of people being put off by the fact you can't do basic functions without having to go into a touchscreen.
I have to say, despite my my kind of take on the 2008, yes, Greg, we're going straight across here. Sorry, we're podcasting and recording a video because we're going to do the podcast on YouTube, and I'm directing Greg to go and find his way out of Loughborough because it's all changed.
And in true engineer fashion, we haven't bothered to set the sat-nav either.
No, we're just watching the sat-nav screen.
We're just watching the sat-nav screen.
Yeah, why would you do that? That would be useful. So yeah, despite its foibles, the 2W8 did have the all-important piano buttons, and actually the piano buttons it's quite an important part of it, because having the buttons flat against the dashboard is one thing, but when they stick out like that, it's actually even easier as a tactile movement without taking your eyes off the road to hit the buttons. And the other thing though, I have to say, this car that we're in, so we're in Greg's Mazda 6, and the V60 is the heads-up display. So I think the kind of technology's gone two ways. You've got one part of the technology which is taking your attention away from the road with all those screens in the centre console, but some manufacturers have counteracted that by adding the heads-up display, which allows you to keep your eyes on the road a lot more, and I'm a massive, massive fan of the heads-up display. I thought it was really a bit gimmicky at first until I started using it, and then realised actually this is brilliant, especially when, if you are driving a little tired, which I will say you probably shouldn't do, but occasionally you get caught in that situation.
You get caught.
Actually, to take your eyes off the road when you're starting to lose your reaction time is even more dangerous. So the heads-up display, by the same means, becomes even more important.
Oh, definitely. And if it's not a heads-up display, I think one of the ways manufacturers can do it really well, and this is where BMW's, I found BMW's single screen dash was very good, is if the display in the centre that's giving you all your critical information is well set up, it's clear, it's concise. It could be a massive help, and that's what it should be. It should be a driver aid. I'd
actually prefer more screen resolution and granularity and a better quality screen in the centre of the steering wheel than in the centre console. I'd be quite happy for the centre console to just have radio and temperature controls in the old school fashion, and then have all the other information in the driver's eye line. Because the passenger doesn't need to know what speed you're doing, doesn't need to know, there's even navigation necessarily. And
it's interesting because whoever's done the ergonomics on it as well, so I'll stand here, if I want to touch this screen, I can touch this screen from here. I'm just over 6'3" tall, and I can touch this. My husband Steve can touch it very easily in his memory position. The Volkswagen is one of the few cars I've got in that I've had to lean forward to get to the centre screen, because it's placed up on the dash.
Yeah.
And again, that is even worse because I'm then leaning forward to do this, as you can probably see, I'm demonstrating, and I'm not focusing.
Yeah.
It's one of the very few cars in a long time that I've got out of, and I felt wound up and not stressed. Stressed is the wrong word. I've just found
it wasn't a relaxing drive.
It was not a relaxing drive. I got to Bristol. I was late to Bristol. Checked into the hotel, and I just sat there, and it was a big sigh of relief. I was like, oh, thank God that drive's over. And that shouldn't be the case. You know, the MGHS, yes, it was thirsty, but you know what? Once it got on the motorway, it settled down. It was just a big, comfortable barge. The BMW 128, brilliant engine, by the way. Phenomenal engine. I'd love to do a review on that separately. Really quick, but really economical.
So BMW, if you're listening / watching, or you're a dealer, or even you have the new 128
Ti,
the Ti, can we borrow it? We'd like to do a review on. Greg really enjoyed that car, which I haven't been the biggest fan of BMW of late.
And how much of a fan have I been of BMW?
Well,
20 odd years that you've known me.
So this is it's a real turn up for the books, actually.
Yeah.
And this is the one we're talking about, the new 128 Ti is the front wheel drive.
Yes.
Mini platform based.
Mini platform based, front wheel drive. I know the purebreds and purebreeds out there will cry that BMW betrayed with the rear wheel drive, but you know what?
I'm one of those. Sorry.
Yeah. In the real world, where you just want to get on with the world but have a bit of fun on UK roads, it's more than adequate. In fact, it's definitely more than adequate. It's very good.
Basically, if you're not doing Nürburgring laps or track days, does it really matter? It's not rear-wheel drive.
It doesn't really matter because the stability control and the aids are really good. It's well balanced. It was firm, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It rode well. It was quiet. The Spotify infotainment system and all.
Sorry, just to point out, that was a Toyota AE86 just went past you the way. Those are like hen's teeth. Carry on.
Yep. Oh, we're also playing Spot the EVs today.
Yes,
white Teslas. White good.
How many have you seen? 3 white Teslas so
three
far?
white Teslas.
If you're buying a Tesla,
Can you get another
don't
colour?
buy it in white. That's boring.
But I did see a Polestar 2 in Loughborough white as well, so I think it's just the colour for
The
EVs.
Polestar 2, I think it's a pretty cool looking car. I've kind of got a bit bored of the Tesla styling.
Yeah,
But-
I like the Polestar 2, particularly in gunmetal grey. But yeah.
Oh yeah, actually, if you're from Polestar, and you've got a spare press Polestar 2, we'd like to try one of those too, because I really, really like that car. Somebody at work's bought one recently and parked next to me in the V60, and I was quite taken by how pretty that car is.
Interesting, it's one of the few cars I've seen of late, notwithstanding...
Speak of the devil.
Speaking of the Polestar, there's one, just gone past us. It's one of the few cars I started to look at that would actually suit my needs. And I go back to a previous podcast where I rant about finding EVs that do everything. This has space for the dogs, has the tow bar on it, you can get lots of kit in it. Yeah, anyway.
It's interesting. So while we're on the subject of EV, I'm going to kind of try and link those two segments because we got very distracted.
We did.
So we were talking a little bit about the cars you've had as hire cars. One of them was the new MG
HS.
Thank you, that one. Which is sort of an SUV, and it's got a small turbocharged engine.
Yep.
And one of the things you were telling me that was most notable about it is how thirsty it is, how much petrol it uses.
Yeah.
Which to most people might seem counterintuitive. It's a modern car. It's got a small engine. Surely it should be economical. Whereas it's a bit of a misnomer, isn't it?
And I go back to the 128 Ti and why I was so impressed with it. That's best part 245 brake horsepower, I believe. So quick. 0 to 60, I think it's about six and a half seconds. So it's playful, plenty of power to overtake, really quite quick. But on the motorway, that's 60, 70 miles an hour, 70 miles an hour on cruise control.
Obviously 70 miles an hour.
Obviously 70 miles an hour. It was doing 48 to the gallon on the way home, and it never dropped below 41 to the gallon. You could get it down, indicated mid-30s if you were having a play. But the MG HS, despite being steady with it, despite having it in eco mode, I could not get from home to Bristol and back, which is about a 400 mile round trip, without having to fill up. I struggled to get it above 33 to the gallon.
That's horrendous, isn't it? So I'm assuming both of these are petrol.
Both of these petrol.
And the MG, so we know the BMW would be a 2 litre 4-cylinder, will it?
2 litre 4-cylinder turbo. The MG is a 1.5 4-cylinder turbo with about 160 brake horsepower.
So actually what you've got is, 1/3 bigger capacity in the BMW and better, almost a third better fuel economy. It seems counterintuitive, but it's the Mazda model. Is simplify, lightness. They've always gone for bigger capacity engines rather than small and turbo.
And on that note, going back to the EVs, interesting for those of you who are watching a lot of the other car channels at the moment, the Megane E-Tech has just arrived. And interestingly, one of the few first comments that's come out from one of the major reviewers on that is the fact that Renault have done a lot of work to lighten the car, which means with a 60 kilowatt battery, so smaller than your sort of 75, 80s that are coming out in a lot of manufacturers' 74s, it's forecast to do 290, nearly 300 miles.
Wow.
But Renault have focused on the fact that they've gone for one of the very first slimline batteries, and they've gone to reduce the weight, because I think they've recognised, and I think their CEO acknowledged, that EVs are just getting a bit too heavy, and you're actually counterintuitively having to put bigger batteries in. I know it's counterintuitive because the battery is the bulk of the weight, but the EVs are getting heavier, which means you need more power to get range, where actually the focus needs to be, let's keep the similar sized battery packs and capacities, your sort of 60, 80 kilowatt hours, but let's lighten the car.
Absolutely. I mean, some of the electric cars are weighing in well over 2 tons. To put it in context, a Bentley Turbo R weighs 3 tons. An early Silver Spirit is 2.3 tons.
2.3.
So you're talking the weight of an early Rolls Royce, an 80s Rolls Royce, for your average runaround. Think of the amount of wear on tyres and roads.
And this is where Renault have done really well with the Zoe. I've got a neighbour who's got a ZE40 Zoe, and she regularly gets 250 miles, and that's only a 40 kilowatt hour battery. But it shows you the importance of weight and what it does to your performance.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
I mean, Colin Chapman would be turning in his grave. His motto was simplify and add lightness.
Yeah.
And that was performance. And here we're talking about performance in a different metric. We're talking about, miles to gallon, miles to kilowatt.
Yeah.
I'm not quite sure what the actual metric is for an electric car, but
it's miles per kilowatt or miles per
kilowatt
watt. It's something. It depends. Manufacturers measure it slightly different. Quite a lot of people in the general public tend to measure how many miles they're getting per kilowatt, because then you can do a very simplification of if you've got 40 kilowatts and you're getting 4 miles per kilowatt, that you can average. 4 times 40 is 160. So
it's an interesting point here. We're trying to get our heads around the metrics and the terminology. We're quite keen petrol heads and generally car people have no aversion to electric cars or hybrid cars, but we haven't managed to make that step into one. It just didn't make sense the last time we were buying a car.
Yeah.
And it's still all a little bit of a blur. It's becoming more popular and more common vernacular, but there is still a lot to learn, I think, about this new technology.
And there's a whole culture change as well. I had this chat with my neighbour who has this.
Stopped. Your car can't have broken down because the engine is still running.
Well,
get out of the middle of the road.
But anyway, once John's had a little run there.
Sorry,
that's fine. But the big thing that people aren't getting either is how to use an EV. So I've got a friend of mine who has a plug-in hybrid. She's got it as a company car. She gets 38 miles out of the battery. And she's actually said what she's learned just having 38 miles of battery in her BMW 2 Series, I think it is that she can go to work and do 95% of what she needs on 38 miles.
That's incredible, isn't it?
And she just plugs it in when she gets home. She says it takes me 10 seconds to plug it in. So actually, Mazda's philosophy of the MX-30, where everybody slated it not having a huge amount of miles, Mazda did say at the time, most people don't need that day to day.
You kind of lulled into this false insecurity that you need maximum range. That's actually the reason we didn't go electric last time. Range said we need 250 miles minimum.
However, that is not being held by the UK's.
Oh, you stupid driver! That was so dead. We'll put that on the camera. You can see why we were swearing. There was plenty of space, and then the driver waited until we were really close, and then pulled out.
Yeah.
I hate stupid drivers. Use your eyes.
I was about to say a BMW driver, but that might be slated BMW drivers. So woosah.
I thought we were going to have a crash on camera. I mean, that would have made great YouTube footage.
Would have made a good job for the insurance company, though, wouldn't it?
No, probably not.
Going back to your point you were saying about Mrs. Automotive Tales, Miss Rach, the big thing I have seen, though, interestingly, as part of my travels up and down the country, is when I've been stopping at services, I've been looking at charging ability, and there is a bit of truth behind what a lot of the reports are saying, that the charging infrastructure is just not good enough. Now, Tesla have just opened up their network to all manufacturers, so
I heard this yesterday.
Hopefully that will be a big step forward and will start to prove that most people could cope with a 250 mile range and just charge up for long journeys if they can get, pop in for a coffee, 20 minutes charge, off you go. And
it's interesting you should say that. So we're part of a village association. It's a very hot fuzz that put an event in our village, and we were having a meeting last night to wrap up from fireworks, 42 South.
Yep, awesome.
And one of the girls in our group, Becky, she's got a Tesla and is driving down to Cornwall today from the East Midlands. And I actually asked her, what's the plan with that? Do you have to stop loads? And she said, no, we'll have 2 breaks on the way down and have something to eat and a coffee, put it on the supercharger, and it'll get, sort of 70-80%, and we'll press on to the next one. And she said we probably won't even bother charging at the destination in Cornwall because the charging infrastructure there is great, but they've got enough range from the last supercharger to get in, do the driving around while they're there, get back to the supercharger, and then charge up for the journey home. She said, and they don't need to stop twice, but they will stop twice, just to put in 60-80% on a rapid charge.
Very nice yodel wagon driver there, I have to add.
Nothing like trying to record when you're on the motorway. So yeah, and she seemed to say it was perfectly practical. She charges at work. She doesn't even have a fast charger at home. She only has a 3-pin trickle charger just in case, and she just doesn't need it. She just charges, while she's out and about.
Yeah.
So I think for Tesla, who've really pushed the infrastructure, that's there, and the fact they're opening up that network to other users, that's going to make a massive difference. And the key, I think, has always been the rapid charge. If you can rapid charge, it gets you closer and closer to the idea of filling your car up.
And the mindset that if you plug in at home overnight, your car's effectively got a full fuel tank every single morning.
Yeah. So I'm hoping electric is on the cards for the next time we change vehicles.
I'd like it to be hydrogen.
Well,
should we bring that into the equation?
This is where I wanted to go. So our last set with yourself, myself...
Diesel, by the way. That's one of the good things of not going to the petrol station in the future. The smell of diesel on your hands.
Yeah, we've just filled up.
We just filled up.
So we had Chris and Martin on the last set of podcasts, but in between then, we did a set of podcasts on what the future of motoring might be. So December last year, we were looking with Graham Bennett and with Jess from, I can't remember the name of her channel, because she's got Racing Mentor as the one she uses now. I'll insert pictures in the YouTube video and I'll put it in the comments section for the podcast. But we were talking about what the future's going to be. And what's changed since then? Well, probably in reality it's not an awful lot. The charging network has got better. We have seen now the government's committed through the 10-point plan to increasing charging networks, building infrastructure for making electric cars in the UK, increasing the size of the national grid to cope with additional electric cars. But we're also seeing a massive upheaval in the oil and gas industry as the hydrogen economy becomes a thing. This is what Graham Bennett was telling us about. He was basically saying, hydrogen is coming, whether you like it or not, it's going to be a thing. And it seems that the car manufacturers are actually slowly taking note. So we've seen Toyota have developed a hydrogen-based internal combustion engine.
Myra?
I think, no, that was a fuel cell one.
No, that's the fuel cell one, yeah.
Yeah. So that is now available. But yeah, I think they're using a Corolla as the base because it uses the same platform. They've just converted the fuel system from hydrogen.
Nice.
And then synthetic fuels have gathered a bit more pace, so Porsche have moved on a bit. I believe, I don't know if 2022 is the year they're going to start using synthetic fuels. I think they're going to use a mix of biofuels at Le Mans, but the aim is to move to using synthetic fuels, and I think Formula One is looking the same direction as well. So we have seen a change, but in terms of you and I, the consumer, I think we're very, very much still in your choices are petrol, diesel, hybrid, electric.
Yep.
Which is a shame. I'd like to see hydrogen coming on board.
Yeah, I think we need to find something like that can provide the longer term, because I'm not convinced unless we can make the next breakthrough in battery technology, whether through graphene changes in technology. Unless we can bring that weight down, I think we will hit a point as well where the batteries will get so heavy it's almost negating the advantage they produce. And for people who need a big 4x4, who need to tow for work, capacity, there needs to be that solution.
There needs to be something, an alternative. And this is the problem with batteries, is we're getting to the point, the law of diminishing returns.
Yes.
There is no big silver bullet in terms of battery technology on the horizon, certainly from what I do for a living. I've done a lot of research into this.
In the near future anyway, unless something comes.
A lot of the improvements are actually coming in the packaging and the control systems for the battery. So you've obviously got your basic cell architecture, which isn't really changing. So the cells themselves, the bit that holds the energy, isn't getting any more energy dense than they already are. The way we pack those into modules, that is improving, and the way we cool those modules, the amount of cooling those modules actually need, is improving. So that's making them slightly better packaged, and then the overall package, including your management system, is getting smaller and smaller and smaller by the year. So we are going to see improvements, but it's going to hit a kind of peak where it can only get so energy dense because it's limited by that cell technology. So yeah, there has to be an alternative. While battery is good, it has a place, I think, and it isn't all motoring.
No.
One thing actually that has come up very recently, I think we mentioned it in the podcast in December, and they're now moving to a more broader trial, is the idea of key motorways in Europe of using pantographs. It's what you get on the top of a train.
Germany.
And they have a power rail above the inside lane of the motorway, and you can use an electric truck, doesn't need large batteries. All its battery's got to do is get it off the motorway network to its depot, and then back onto the motorway network, and then it's on charge again. And it's charging from that and running from that power. And I actually think that's a really, really good idea.
It's a good idea, but I think the fundamental changes and the amount of money to change something like the Autobahn network, because obviously that's being trialled in Germany at the moment, or has just finished a trial there, is significant.
Yeah, it's an infrastructure cost.
And this is where, again, just so we've got a Kona coming past us. Hyundai Kona.
Is it an electric one?
I'm not sure if it's an EV one, no?
No, I think it's
No, it's petrol. Damn. Chunks. But on a side note, we were talking the other day about trams and stuff in the city centre. We think back to older technology. We used to have trams in pretty much every city and trolley buses, and we got rid of them for the convenience, and now we're looking to go back to some of that technology. So it's quite interesting how the circle goes round sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, it seems the current government has no fear of spending money on infrastructure projects, which I should point out I think is a very good thing. A lot of inward investment to the future. But whatever we do with transport, there needs to be an infrastructure. We can't just rely on the manufacturers to solve the problem. We need to give the infrastructure to go with it. In the same way when, mass transport became a thing, we had to build motorways to take the pressure off the little A roads that were existing, that were used by, Fred and his Ford Model T and the horse and cart.
And as much as I love my cars, I think one of the big areas has to be the railways. Again, I'm using hire cars, as we've just discussed, to get to Bristol, because the railway network to get to Bristol from where I live is about 3 changes, which is not too much of the end of the world, but it's £160.
That's ridiculous
for a ticket. And even if I book it out in advance, it's £120 to do a 4-hour journey, and it's cheaper to hire a car and put the fuel in it.
So I've just come up with a challenge idea. Those that follow the Automotive Tales YouTube channel will be familiar with a project I did in summer this year, where I had the option of basically using the Rolls-Royce to drive to Yorkshire, or nothing, because all the other cars were either broken or in use. And I worked out how much it was going to cost in fuel to do the journey from East Midlands up to West Yorkshire in the Rolls-Royce, and worked out it was cheaper to buy a slightly broken Peugeot, drive that Peugeot, fix that Peugeot, drive it back, and then sell it on, than it was to put fuel in the Rolls-Royce. By the same means, I wonder whether, if you were to get a last-minute ticket from, let's say, Glasgow or Edinburgh to London, which I'm aware is in the sort of £300 region, could you buy a car that would get you that journey and back, including the fuel, and then sell it on for the same price or less than the train ticket? Because if you can buy a car, tax it, insure it, drive it, do any repairs you need, fuel it, for less than a train ticket, there is something very, very wrong with our public transport network.
Yeah.
On that note, I think we should bring this podcast into the station of motorway waffling, as we're sort of heading towards the NEC. And, well, if you come with anything else to rant about, we'll always do another episode either later on the journey or on the way back. So, on that note, thank you for listening, and do keep your eyes on the Automotive Tales YouTube channel and on the podcast. We'll try and do a few more podcasts. I'm hoping to rope a few people in we're going to talk to at the NEC today. I've now got a venue where we can set up a proper podcast studio, which has, believe it or not, has a bar, like an actual bar with pumped beer and everything.
See, there you go.
So maybe we might need to find a motel as well for people to stay over,
Well,
because
yes.
it could get messy.
It could.
But yeah, so keep an eye on the channels. You can also follow us on all the social medias. So we're at Automotive Tales on Twitter, on Instagram, and Greg is at CEng on Instagram.
YorkshireCEng.
At YorkshireCEng, sorry, on Twitter. You haven't quite figured out the gram thing yet, have you?
No, not yet. It's on my to-do list. I thought I'd grow the beard first. Power of the beard.
The beard is great. Maybe the beard should just have its own Instagram.
Maybe, yeah. Stories of a beard.
Yeah, indeed. The beardy car journo. Right. Anyway, thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time. That's all for this episode of the Automotive Tales podcast. Bye.
Okay.
Don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Thank you for watching.